Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sampo Karkola. I am head of unit in the Hazard Assessment Directorate here in ECHA. Today I will talk to you about ECHA support to increase compliance of your registration dossiers. I have three main topics for the presentation. First, I will talk about the background and objectives of this process. Second, I will describe the support that the companies will receive for the process and the pilot project that we ran last year. And finally, I will talk about the benefits of the process and some further considerations to take into account. So first, the background and objectives. In 2018, ECHA and CEFIC published a joint statement on agreement to cooperate to improve registration dossiers. 2019, in the REACH Evaluation Joint Action Plan, there was a clear point for the industry to improve their registration dossiers proactively and continuously. On the same year, CEFIC, in cooperation with ECHA, launched a voluntary action plan, which I will talk more about. And by the end of last year, 190 companies had signed up with CEFIC for this program. The objectives of this voluntary action plan are listed here in this slide. First of all, a voluntary review of registrations of groups of substances by CEFIC member companies. A crucial part of it is a development of category justifications and testing strategies, and it contains a couple of elements. First of all, a review on the existing groups and category justifications and modification of those if needed. Second, identification of data gaps in the registration dossiers and for the whole categories. To optimize data generation, mainly in terms of costs and process efficiency. And finally, to minimize the need for compliance checks. There is informal support available from ECHA. And of course, the final end objective is to improve the safe use of substances, as mentioned in REACH. How does the process then look like? The whole thing starts with ECHA when the companies submit to us information on the groups of substances that they intend to work on in the coming year or years. Once we receive that information, we will compare those groups of substances against our own work plan for the next year and the coming years, and select the groups for this interaction process. The next step is that the companies send to ECHA the initial testing strategies, which are then reviewed by us, and we provide informal feedback. We will indicate whether we think it makes sense, whether we have identified some issues to cover, and maybe if some further data generation is needed. The industry, that is the companies, are then expected to adapt the testing strategies and update their testing strategies following ECHA's informal feedback. And that should then end up in a testing proposal submission for the selected substances. Once we receive those testing proposals in the dossier updates, we will then evaluate them through the normal testing proposal examination process, which will then result in decisions requesting the proposed or modified higher tier studies. Then the decision, of course, gives a deadline for the registrants to provide the requested information, which is then submitted to ECHA by the deadline, hopefully. And we will then perform a normal follow-up evaluation to those registration dossiers to conclude whether the category eventually holds and whether the information requirements have been fulfilled. All this is facilitated by CEFIC, so CEFIC is not a counterpart in any of these testing strategy developments, but CEFIC acts as a kind of an umbrella facilitator for the whole time. Once we receive all the information from the registrations, we will then use that for screening work for regulatory risk management. As mentioned, last year we ran a pilot. We had 4 groups of 2 to 15 substances selected together by ECHA and some companies. According to the process, we did receive the initial category justifications and testing strategies, and we then reviewed them and provided the informal feedback. Indeed, after that, the companies took ECHA's advice into account and refined the justifications and the testing strategies. One element here is that ECHA requested to see proof that companies had indeed ordered the lower tier studies, for example, letters from the laboratories confirming the order of the study. And then we also saw, of course, the testing proposals for the long-term endpoints. Here I have listed some important observations from the pilot, basically the learnings. First issue is that the substance identity of the substances must be clear. This is a prerequisite for read-across adaptations and for the whole category justification. We must know what we are looking at and use the information to evaluate read-across. Second point is that supporting information is essential in deciding on substances to be tested for higher tier endpoints. Supporting information here means Annex 7 and 8 studies, but also studies that are not necessarily the standard information requirements. For example, toxicokinetics, metabolomics, and so on. And here important point is that those supporting studies should be conducted before developing a testing strategy. It makes everything work faster. And the next point is that the category read-across justification should follow ECHA's read-across assessment framework, the RAF, available on our website. And the testing proposal should be submitted for the test substances or most probable test substances. And we also noticed that the consortium negotiations are not necessarily very quick. They might take some time. There might be several registrants in the joint submission that need to be contacted and the issues need to be agreed with. Then a little bit of our requirements for groups of substances for this process. We would like to see coherent groups of substances with a similar structure and similar hazard properties. As mentioned already, clear substance identity is crucial for the justifications. We would not like to see any tonnage band changes during the process because that affects on the information requirements of the substances. The groups should be reasonable in size, from let's say 5 to 15 substances. If they are too small, for example, 1-to-1 read across only between 2 substances, then it's not really worth the effort. We would appreciate if no regulatory processes were ongoing for any of the substances in the proposed group, because that complicates the work quite a lot. And finally, the substances should be in the not yet assigned pool of ECHA's chemical universe. What are then the benefits of this process? Benefits to the companies is on one hand a very systematic review of registration dossiers, ending or resulting in a dossier that is up to date in terms of tonnage, use, and hazard information. You get some time to develop those categories and testing strategies, and you can benefit from informal interaction with ECHA to better understand the regulatory requirements and what do we want to see in the dossiers and justifications in order for them to be compliant. There's much higher chance of data compliance once you have finalized the testing strategy that was agreed with ECHA, once it has been implemented and finalized. There's also, of course, the benefit of minimization of animal testing and reduced costs for the studies. The benefits to the authorities is that we get a clear commitment from the companies that they are generating new hazard information. Proof of lower tier and other supporting data generation is usually required so that we can see the commitment from the company. And then, of course, with testing proposals for higher tier endpoints, we also understand the commitment by the companies. Additional benefits are the data gaps are then filled without the need to open formal and sometimes quite heavy compliance check processes. New data facilitates, of course, further regulatory work. Either we can exclude the substances as low hazard and no need to react, at least at the moment, but also then for potential future regulatory risk management processes. And similarly as for companies, animal testing would be minimized. The grouping by ECHA is a little bit different from grouping by the companies and the industry. I won't talk too much about that because there was just an earlier presentation on ECHA grouping, but I just highlight a few points here. We address groups of similar substances in a holistic manner. And it's much more efficient to do it like this compared to a single substance approach. An important point is that this kind of work avoids regrettable substitution, but we still have a possibility to address substances one by one and open compliance checks where needed. Some things to take into account with the grouping of the substances. Companies have an obligation to share data and costs of newly generated information. And usually there are consortia agreements in place for that, and those, of course, must be followed. It should be kept in mind that category hypothesis may change based on the newly generated supporting or higher tier information. So the initial category justification might not be confirmed at the end of the process. And companies should keep in mind that they may need to react to that. If the category hypothesis does not hold at the very end of the process, then we may go on and open compliance checks to fill in the data gaps. We noticed that it's quite resource intensive, this process, both for companies and to us as well. To get the best learnings out of it, we will have a review of the process by the end of this year together with the CEFIC. So how to get involved in this process? If not already done, please sign up for the CEFIC plan. Contact other registrants of similar substances. Establish or review data and cost sharing contracts so that it's absolutely clear to everybody what's happening in that front. Make sure that your substance identity is clear. And perform a data gap analysis. So basically check whether you have enough supporting data. And if you do not have enough of it, we highly recommend to start generating it immediately. There's no need for an ECHA decision for Annex 7 and 8 endpoints or any studies outside the standard information requirements. The next step would be to develop a category read across hypothesis based on available data and then possibly refine it later based on the supporting data results once they have come in. Then inform ECHA about your group. And along the whole process, we highly recommend to follow ECHA's advice so that everything goes smoothly. As a summary, I just listed here 3 points. The CEFIC Voluntary Action Plan is indeed your chance to improve compliance of your dossiers and benefit from interaction with ECHA. We will support you. We will give informal feedback before going to the formal testing proposal examination processes, for example. And finally, there is a significant reduce in costs when the data and the new studies are shared between several registrants. and the animal testing is of course then minimized. Here I have collected a few links that should hopefully are helpful to you. First, the links to ECHA and CEFIC websites regarding this project. And then ECHA webpage on grouping and read across, so how to perform it so that it fulfills the regulatory requirements. ECHA's chemical universe is a useful place to check whether your substances are in the not yet assigned region or somewhere else. And finally, the recommendations for registrants by us, as mentioned in the previous presentation. With this, I thank you for your attention and hope you a lovely day. Thank you very much.